shot as soon as we got the go, straight to the front. Every now and again, the different triad groups will fall out with each other. You know, they'll have trodden on each other's toes. So they have what they call a settlement talk, where they meet somewhere, and either they resolve their disputes or they end up in this big chopping, and we get called to these big gang fights where they're all chopping away at each other with meat cleavers.
Rupert, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Chris. How are you doing?
Yes, I've really been looking forward to our conversation, and I should first off start by thanking you for joining my Facebook One Life Smash It community group.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it. Normally I'm off charging around the world on either working or on one of my motorcycle or yomping adventures, but because of COVID, I've been stuck here. I'm here in Hong Kong, and I started watching. I hadn't watched any news really, and I soon gave that up for the same reasons you've probably given up watching the mainstream news. And I started getting onto YouTube and sort of following all this new world called the podcast world, which has been enlightening. It really has. And then I found you, and I've been following some of your causes which are close to home, and I like all the the nutrition, men of our age looking after ourselves, keeping on top of things, keeping positive, all that sort of thing. So I've enjoyed it, and then it's expanded. I'm following your friend who's currently yomping from John O'Groats to Land's End, I think.
Yeah, he's legging it, isn't he? He's
yeah.
It's Mike, for people at home, that's Mike Buster Keating. I did a video about him running the length of the country. Yeah, it's funny, Rupert, actually, because I guess I can blow my own trumpet a bit. He said I inspired him to do it. He's the second person that's attempting it since I did it. The first chap didn't get very far, unfortunately. I did try to tell him, don't carry so much weight. I carried 15 kilos, and that's all my camping equipment, and it was way too much. But there's only so much pounding the body can take on, especially when you're running on the roads. But yeah, good luck to Mike out there. I'm always humbled, Rupert, when someone joins me, whether it's on my Patreon or Facebook or whatever. Just humbled. It's such a beautiful thing to be able to share a bit of humanity with people and find out that we all share a bit of common ground.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the point. It's I've been out in the Far East a long time, and I'm sort of, it's like Life on Mars, really. That series where you go back in time, and I'm still in the 80s in a way. I mean, it's, we'll talk about it probably later about Hong Kong and so forth. But, I feel like, when you've come out here and lived this sort of colonial life, and then you've continued onwards, it seems sometimes that, the UK, where I'm from, has gone off in a different direction. And it's refreshing to see there's still people like you back there, who are just, seeing we have a lot in common.
Yeah, it's kind of all roads lead to Rome for a lot of us at the grand old age of 50. I was actually 51, was it day before yesterday?
Yeah, happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you.
50.
It's interesting times. Let's not talk about the current situation simply because it becomes an editing nightmare.
Yep.
To then get the podcast through YouTube. But I think everyone knows what we're on about. It's interesting times. It's incredibly difficult times for a lot of people, and it comes down to the fact that some people are still living in the old system. They live in the matrix. They believe their mainstream media. They haven't yet had a moment of enlightenment in life that's opened their eyes up to the fact it's all a facade and it's all a lie. And I wish there was a way you could just flick a switch in people and they'd go, oh right, yeah, no, I get you now. But it's just not that simple, is it?
Yeah. As I said, I turned off. I think being here during the disturbances last year, and then seeing the Western media reports, which were completely skewed. I'm not saying that, because I'm a former Royal Hong Kong police officer, but when whichever one you watch, the CNN or BBC or Sky, it just seemed a slanted, reporting of what was actually going on. I mean, it wasn't balanced. And I grew up at the BBC like you, and I've been in far off places listening to BBC World Service and enjoying it. And it's a completely different thing now. And without going off on a tangent on this stuff, I just stopped watching it. And that's hence why I started watching. There's no point arguing against it. I think you mentioned in one of your podcasts about people jumping in and writing comments and things like this, and I've been guilty of it myself. And there's a few of us, former officers, and we've just said amongst us, what's the point? Just say nothing.
It's a shame, Rupert, because you get to a certain age, and if you're just reasonably educated, you can't listen to Radio 1 anymore. That's just absolute trash. And then you move to BBC Radio 2, and you think you're a bit more sophisticated, and that becomes a bit kind of passé or whatever the word is. And then you go to the wonderful Radio 4, and you can actually learn some stuff on that channel. Right? Now it's got to the stage where when you become enlightened, you see the whole system for what it is, and Radio 4 just becomes painful to listen to. And it's a shame. It's a shame you can't just get a regular radio station without going to the internet, that you can just tune in. And I don't know why I'm doing that. We don't really tune in a radio like, well, you kind of can, I suppose, on some, but yes, it's interesting times. But let's talk about your story, because it's fascinating. I mean, for one thing, Yip Kai Fun is a name everyone will be going, who? And yet to you and I, he's a character that formed a seminal moment in both of our lives.
Certainly. I mean, I've just started reading your book, Eating Smoke, and I'm recognizing, I know that that mid-90s time, I at that time, or just before then, I was in a unit of the Royal Hong Kong Police called Emergency Unit, and I was one of the platoon commanders of Kowloon West. And I went there. It was at the start of my second tour, and I was very lucky to get in, actually. And it was a good unit and a busy region. I had a platoon of 70 guys, 13 of them NCOs, one station sergeant, and we patrolled. We were the response unit, not quite the same as the ARU. You had a guest on from Devon and Cornwall. Was it Harry?
Harry.
Yeah.
Yes. Tanya.
Yeah, Harry. Tanya. That's it. Tanya. was describing the sort of armed response unit in the UK and how that evolved. And of course, I was in the UK police before I came out here. But in that time, talking about Yip Kai Foon, I mean, the story was he had been arrested and convicted and sent to prison in '89, and he escaped by feigning illness and escaped from the hospital. Then, you know, you'd think he would disappear and not to be seen. No, he came back in vengeance. And there were a number of gangs coming down. I mean, he's a Guangdong boy. He's a, you know, southern China guy. He got emboldened, and we were battling, and we were responding to goldsmith shops. So our job in EU was to respond to the 999 call, the first response to 999. And unlike the Royal Hong Kong Police, or the Hong Kong Police, unlike the UK Police, everyone is armed. All the officers are armed. You go through training school. You're trained in firearms. In fact, later on, I was a title, an amazing title called Drill and Musketry Instructor. It's an incredible title to have on your resume. But anyway, so all officers were armed. You know, we carried a .38 Smith & Wesson, and we're trained in how to use it, and the training improved over my time. But in EU, well, I was in. So let me go from the start. So for expatriate officers like me, there'd be an intake. We'd be drawn, we'd have to apply. So I was in the Metropolitan Police. I did 5 years in the Met in West London, in Ealing. And I joined the police when I was 18, and I came out here when I was 23, and I did the selection at Grafton Street in London, totally separate to the Met. I mean, most of the guys who came out here were not police officers. There were quite a few military guys, some straight out of university. So we went through this selection process, and then to be an inspector is sort of similar to being recruited as an officer in the military, sort of. You know, you do this the same kind of leadership potential tests and that kind of thing, and of course there's a sort of basic education standard.
Do you have
so
to
in
be,
my intake?
Do you have to be awful with a map and compass? Exactly.
And so I came out in February '87 with 9 other expatriates and joined 30 local probationary inspectors at the training school in Aberdeen, in Wong Chuk Hang in Aberdeen, and that's the start of 10 months training. I mean, it's quite a lot of training before you go out to your police station. So it's I was a constable in the Met, and I was one of, in my intake there were a couple of other ex police officers. One was a sergeant in GMP, so Greater Manchester Police. We had 2 ex-army officers, and the rest were graduates straight from university. And then from the local intake, so 30 Chinese, they were nearly all from university. There were a couple of guys who went up through the ranks, from PC to inspector or sergeant to inspector, and they had to go through a different selection process. So there were 40 in my intake, 10 months. And then we do, unlike Hendon, we did firearms training. For us, we did leadership training, getting lost with map and compass in the new territories, that kind of stuff. We did, for people like, for the expatriates, we had to learn Cantonese. Our first, I think it's 8 weeks, we had Cantonese, and which is quite interesting because it's a tonal language, and our instructor was deaf, so he thought we were all pretty good at it, which we weren't. And then the locals, the local education system is very academic, and so a lot of them have never done things like put up a tent or sleep outside or do outward bounds type things. And they go off on an 8-week outward bounds course to improve, because all of us have done that kind of stuff, camping, and it could be Duke of Edinburgh, or it could, people have been in the military or whatever. The local guys hadn't. So we actually we came together. We did and over that time, so we did Cantonese, and then we also did foot drill. We had an ex-Scots Guard guy called Willie Fullerton, who was the chief drill and musketry instructor, and the drill standard was high. I mean, it was disciplined. The police constable, recruit police constables did drill with a old style Lee Enfield with a bayonet on it. We wore most of the time, we just wore shorts, boots and shorts, no top, and a flat cap, and that was and when we went into the officers' mess, we put on a shirt. That's our uniform, baggy shorts, which is pretty much what I wear to this day.
I'm getting images of It Ain't a Half Hot, Mum.
It's exactly like that. The uniform looks like that, or used to. And in fact, the police constables used to, or the officers used to patrol in shorts, pretty much up to the 80s, and then it changed to the sort of safari suit, the tailored safari suit that I had pretty much through my time, a sort of green one in the summer, and a winter uniform which looked pretty much like a UK police officer's uniform in the short winter months. So we go through that. So I said leadership, drill. There's a lot of academics. I'd done some of it before, but so there's criminal law and what they call police general orders, which is learning procedures and so forth. It's pretty dull stuff, but you got to learn it, and that's tough. And it's all in English, and so it's quite hard on the Chinese officers, because they've got to pass all the exams in a second language. Those guys worked all night to get through those exams. And we had good times. We used to go off on leadership exercises in helicopters and be dumped off in the new territories and Lantau, and there was lots of. I enjoyed it. There's a lot of PT, much more than the Met. A lot of we used to have to do. I think it's similar to the military annual fitness test, AFT. All the usual sit-ups, press-ups, pull-ups, all those things, and then the 1.5 mile run. And before, I turned up quite fit because I boxed at light heavy in the Metropolitan Police, so I was already I was lucky that I turned up reasonably fit and could run, because there's a lot of running. And then you go through, there's pretty much like the military, I suppose. There are different stages. You've got exams at every stage, and you've got to get through. And people fail and get turned back and get sent back to England. And then the makeup of the expatriates was pretty much anyone from the Commonwealth. So we had not just Brits, but South Africans, Aussies, Kiwis, Canadians, and a disproportionate number of Scottish for some reason. I don't know why that was. There's a lot of Scottish officers.
Hong Kong has that connection with Scotland, doesn't it? Because of the when you go back to the ancient times, which wasn't all that long ago, they formed the traders, didn't they? The original traders were of Scottish.
Jardine Matheson, all that sort of thing. Yeah, all the old hongs, all the old trading houses. So there seem to be a lot of Scottish officers, and then it comes to passing out if you've made it that far. And I was lucky to be awarded Baton of Honour, which is a kind of best in your intake thing. I don't think it's quite like King's Badge or Sword of Honour, but something along those lines. And I suppose my reward, or I was told, the only sort of reward I could see is I could choose my posting. And so I said, right, I want to go to Marine. Because in the officers' mess one day, I'd read this letter, the South China Morning Post. Before internet and everything, people used to vent their displeasure by writing letters into the South China Morning Post. And there's some lady wrote in complaining that she'd seen a police launch with an expatriate sunbathing and someone water skiing behind, and there were cans of beer being thrown over the sides and everything. And I thought, right, that's the job for me. But when it came to it, my course instructor said, no, you got to get a proper job, which is going to upset the mariners in the Hong Kong police. You know, because it was a big. So you had a choice of New Territories, Kowloon West, New Territories North, New Territories South, Kowloon West, Kowloon East, and Hong Kong Island and Marine Division.
For our friends at home who haven't been in Hong Kong is essentially an island. Roughly speaking, it's about the size of a city, the whole island. And then to the north of the island, you have the Kowloon Peninsula, which comes down in the same way, say, that I'm just looking at the map here, South America comes down. The bottom part of that peninsula is called Kowloon, or Kowloon Side, as the expats refer to it. And the north of Kowloon is the New Territories, and they border onto China. So, yeah.
So it's essentially, you know, when 97 came up, that was the end of the 99-year lease for the territory, the Hong Kong territory north of Boundary Street. So that included the New Territories. In fact, Hong Kong Island was ceded to the British in perpetuity, and not a lot of people know that. So it wasn't Hong Kong Island, and it was decided, you know, you remember Margaret Thatcher in the early 80s negotiating with the Chinese about what to do when the lease for the New Territories came up in 97, and the rest is history. You know, I will probably talk later, you know, what I think they perhaps should have done to, you know, prevent what the position we're in today. But so that's what happened. I mean, the British could have kept it. You know, I'm not going to talk. Other people know better than me about the politics behind it. But you know, it was decided mostly on the British side that, you know, because it's Hong Kong. You know, I talk about my China side of what I do, because I also live in Shanghai. But the China side, you know, it suited them as a planned, you know, communist country. It suited them having, you know, Hong Kong on their doorstep. It was a doorway, you know. They could, but also there was the, you know, the great shame, you know, the colonial aspect, and also amongst, you know, not just Chinese, mainland Chinese people, but Hong Kong Chinese people, you know, about, you know, you can't continue with this old style colonial systems. And so what happened, you know, handover in 97. But going back to, you know, we pass out, and I went to a division called Kowloon City. I don't know whether you know Kowloon. It's right near where Kai Tak Airport was. Okay. So Kai Tak Airport. So that area was where the station I got posted to as a. I mean, you got to do, you know, a couple of weeks as duty officer, which involved double entry bookkeeping in the bail book, as far as I could work out. Is that anything to do with the walled city? Exactly. So that the walled city was within my division. So the first thing I did when I got posted to Kowloon City was explore the walled city. Unbelievable. You know, you've seen the movie Blade Runner. A sort of dystopian future, you know, flashing, sizzling fluorescent lights and dripping water and people all over the place. It was a three-dimensional maze, pretty much the same night and day. You couldn't tell if it was the, you know, the day or night, and you had to go around with a torch, and there used to be dripping pipes and sparking electrical cables and people milling about. One of the things which put me off of life is fish balls. Have you ever eaten them? Yes. Well, they used to make them in there. So it'd be a huge room, larger than, you know, this house, full from the floor, the dirty floor, to the ceiling with fishball paste. And it stank to high heaven. For people who don't know Hong Kong climate, you know, the summer is 35 degrees centigrade and 100% humidity. I mean, it's sticky, hot. hot place, and fishball paste fermenting inside the middle of the walled city is something to behold. I mean, it's quite pungent.
Yeah, we should maybe try and get our friends at home to see the picture. This was an absolute phenomenon, this walled city. It literally was like a walled city of very shoddily constructed tenement type size buildings at least. It was extreme poverty. It was rampant, I'm going to guess, with triads. And it was also where the famous Jackie Pullinger worked, wasn't it? She
yeah, that's right.
She rescued people suffering with heroin addiction, and she brought them to Jesus. And she wrote a very famous book about it.
I met her a while back. I went to have a look at it. You know, it's all been knocked down and it's a park now in Kowloon. But there's a museum there, and that was quite interesting. But I used to patrol it, so the first thing I wander around, and it's about 12 stories high, sort of like a sort of Borg cube. And around the outside were illegal dentists. So if you didn't have much money, that's where you got your teeth pulled out or your stuff done, and with varying degrees of skill but that's what I remember. All the dentist shops were around the outside, but you went inside, and how it evolved is that it was actually a walled city, the Qing dynasty. So going back in history, when the Hong Kong police were formed in 1841, native indigenous people were ruled under Qing law. I mean, it's quite brutal, you know, the beheadings on beach. You've probably seen those pictures of people being beheaded, pirates and things being beheaded on beaches and stuff. And then the British, or the foreigners, and they were held to account under British law, what it was and how it's evolved over all those times. But the Qing, but the walled city sort of, and if getting my history right, remained under sort of Qing dynasty law for longer than the rest of Hong Kong. So there was a sort of myth that criminals could, you know, leg it away from us down the streets of Kowloon and dive in there, and then they've reached home. In my time, that wasn't so, because we would just chase after them. Now, usually they'd lose us because they knew it. It was so complicated. They could run to ground and hide. But inside was quite fascinating. There were Qing dynasty cannons right in the middle if you looked hard enough. And then if you climbed up to the roof, this is one of the most amazing things. So you will remember when you arrived in Hong Kong, you come into Kai Tak, and at the last minute, the plane, the 747, usually coming from Europe, would bank a steep right over the top of the walled city, and then line up with Kai Tak, whatever it was, runway 31 or whatever it was back in the day, and then land on this runway, which was reclaimed land out into the harbour, and then, you know, come to a halt, hopefully, before it went off the edge. And a couple did go off the edge. I'll tell you a story for when I was in the EOD. We cut the tail off. But I used to go up there, you know, on patrol, and you could read the writing underneath the aeroplanes as they came across. And if you were in the aeroplane, you could see people, as it banked, it seemed as if people were hanging their washing out the window.
Unreal. Literally look out your aeroplane window of your jumbo jet, and you see someone putting their washing out next to you. It's almost like you could, if the window wasn't there, you could reach out and touch them. And wasn't there that rumor that the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, had planned to take down a British Airways jumbo jet from Kowloon using an RPG smuggled into the country? I don't know how legitimate that story is, but
well, an RPG getting into Hong Kong, I'll tell you later, because I was in a EOD CARDA. I was a CARDA bomb disposal officer from 98 to 97, and there were an assortment of various weapons that got into Hong Kong. about that story. I've heard it. I can't say I know much more about it. You know, whether they did it or not, or whether they were planning it and how far it got through. But you know, from you know, you could probably hit it with a stick from the top of the walled city. I mean, it was so close. You know, the wheels, the undercarriages have obviously come down, and you could see right inside. You could see the writing and everything. It was so close. And you know, the way they peeled, you know, the wing came down and they turned right. And of course, in those days, now Kowloon is built up because the airport is here on this island where I live. But at Chep Lak Kok, the north side of Lantau is all reclaimed land, and they've got 2 runways and so forth, and a bridge going to Macau and all sorts of things. But back then, you know, it was sort of, you know, Kai Tak was bolted onto Kowloon City. And Kowloon City was a very interesting place, you know, during my time there. You know, I think on my day of attachment, I just happened to stumble across a burglary in progress in one of the restaurants. And my Cantonese wasn't great, but I heard on the radio, and this is what happened. It came over the radio, the name of this street. I looked up, and I'm underneath the street sign. I'm going, oh, I'm actually on site. And it was lit at 2 or 3 shops down. I looked through the glass, and there's 2 people rolling around on the ground inside the shop. And so I went in and beat up both of them, which meant that one of them got arrested. And the victim of the burglary didn't seem too bothered about it. He was quite happy that we'd arrested the burglar. That's typical Hong Kong. So, oh, thank you very much, sir.
Blimey.
Yeah, I remember that. So it was on my...
Do we know which Triad organisation ran the walled city?
Well, you mentioned in your book the 14K, and 14K had their patch, and they were certainly around in Kowloon. So, but there were lots. The Sun Yon were the most common, I think, in my day at least. The Sun Yon seemed to be, especially when I later transferred to Jim Sa Joy. So we had Kowloon East and Jim Sa Joy East, where all the nightclubs were. There was Club Volvo, used to be called Club Volvo, and then became Club Boss, and you know, those big nightclubs so there was Sun Yon, War Hut Top. There was, but 14K and Sun Yon were the sort of prevailing bad boys. But there's triads. There's all sorts of different triad groups, and they have their little fiefdoms, and there's certain things they get up to. You know, usually prostitution, gambling, drugs, and protection rackets. You know, extortion. You know, providing protection for various shops. Now they're all high tech, involve everything you think of, from money laundering to fraud, corruption. You know, cryptocurrency scams, the whole lot. But you know, when I was at training school, before I went out there, I tried to understand what triads were. You know, in my mind, I thought there was sort of like a mafia group, and it's not structured like that. They would have these office holders within each triad group. They would recruit kids through the schools, you know, the usual way. You know, it became, I mean, the background of triads is really a nationalistic militia, really, back in the day. And there's still some sympathy for them among, you know, members of the public. It's not sort of like the mafia. For instance, I lived in Sheko. You know, do you know where Sheko is on Hong Kong Island? It's the peninsula on the far southeast of Hong Kong Island. It's a sort of beach place, quite a nice little rural village on Hong Kong Island. They have a local triad group, and you know, I knew who they were, and they were fairly benign. You know, they sort of sorted out traffic problems and disputes and generally resolved things. In a lot of ways, did a better job than the police. It wasn't the sort of, you know, dark underside that you describe in your that happened in Wan Chai and Jimsi and those Yuen Long and those sort of places. So there's a broad spectrum, and then there's certain traditional, straw sandal and dragon head and various, straw sandal would be the administrative officer of it, and then there'd be various sort of warrior positions, and then there'd be support, almost like in the military, and it's almost like a regiment. So each one is kind of like a regiment. They have a traditional area where they cover, and there would be some structure and discipline, internal discipline, recruiting, various and things like that. It's sort of like a club. So so we were taught about them, and some of the ceremonies, the tattoos, and because to this day Triad tattoos are illegal. If you have one, you can get arrested. Triad poems, reciting Triad things. And then there would be, the initiation ceremonies, which to my uneducated sort of, not view of things, look sort of Buddhist. They look like Buddhist ceremonies with,
a lot of parallels with the Masonic initiation.
A lot of, there's obviously selection and, recruitment selection and training. You've got to learn certain rituals like Freemasons do. They learn, the craft and secrets and stuff like that. And so do Triads. But the ones that we'll go on to Yip Kai Foon later, but whether I don't even know if he was a Triad from, or he was given a Triad title. But there were a lot of during that time when the goldsmith robberies were going on, I think there were different groups. I mean, Yip Kai Foon is identified in as a famous picture of standing in Nathan Road with a Type 56, which is Chinese People's Liberation Army AK-47, standing there in that pose. You've probably seen the picture. He's standing.
Should I just tell you, for the benefit of our friends at home? So I've been to Hong Kong, I think 3, maybe 4 times. The very first time I got a cheap indulgence flight on British Airways through the military. So I paid 30 quid to fly over. Flew over on my own because I couldn't get anybody to go with me. Snuck into the military barracks over there, HMS Tamar, using my ID card. And then the lads, the Marines over there, who were all riding speedboats or coxswaning speedboats to take out the drug traffickers and the illegal immigrants. They put me up in one of their rooms. And cut a long story short, I'm wandering down the road one day, and suddenly all this automatic gunfire goes up. In fact, first, I'm looking at these jewelry shops, and they're exquisite in Hong Kong. All the gold and red facades. It's really quite something to see. It looks, the sort of enterprise you'd imagine Donald Trump would want to own and promote. All that gold and all that sort of plaza-ness. And so I'm wondering, why have the security guards, many of whom I seem to remember were Nepalese former Gurkhas, why are they carrying shotguns? It was extreme. I mean, you never would see that in the UK, certainly not back in the day. I don't know if things have changed now. I don't think they have. And as I'm pondering why have these guys all got shotguns, all this automatic rifle fire went off. I think in my book, I thought I was in Western District, but I think it was actually in Kowloon. It's just when I wrote the book, I couldn't remember 25 years back where exactly I was. But so I went back to the barracks that evening, and I'm watching the news, and lo and behold, this character Yip Kai Foon has been rampaging down the street, robbing the jewelry stores with his AK-47. He was intercepted by the armed Hong Kong police. A running gun battle then ensued, in which I believe one pedestrian or one shopper was shot dead. And my gosh, there it all is on the news. And it wasn't until I wrote my book, like I say, 15, 20 years later, that somebody wrote to me and said, oh, Chris, that chap's name is Yip Kai Fun. And they sent me a YouTube video. And I was like, that was the footage I saw, Rupert, you know?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that was actually videotaped, you know, in the early days, in the early 90s. It's not like today where everyone's got a, you know, video on their phone. Someone had a Sony video camera and took it. So that guy, which was in the newspaper, I'm told by my colleagues who are in the know, you know, the regional crime units and those guys who investigated that stuff at the time, that wasn't Yip Kai Fun, but it was part of his gang. And I think that guy actually got shot later that day. That particular guy, and Yip Kai Fun obviously didn't, because he carried on. So just to go back to the chronology. So it's, you know, I went to Jim Sajoi as a patrol subunit commander. That means you're the inspector of a shift, you know, regular uniform shift. And I very much wanted to get into the counter-terrorist team. It's called Special Duties Unit, and it was set up because the British SAS are in the UK, and to be deployed to do black, you know, CT stuff would be, you know, it's not going to work. So they trained up. So we went through a similar early stage, two-week horrific selection process. And so I was getting fit and prepared for that in 1988, and I'm still in, and I did it, and I completed the selection, but I didn't get selected, which I think to this day is unfair. There was 3 of us left standing at the end, and 2 got selected, and I didn't, and that's the way it is. And I'm told, because I worked for the head of CTU later on as in the private sector, is because of my final interview, I said I suffered from claustrophobia. So after all that, you know, running around, and I mean, they did the phobia test. You probably got an idea what they do.
I think it's more likely, Rupert, you're too handsome to go undercover.
Well, SDU was at sort of I was a bit I was pretty disappointed not to get in. I said, look, I'll do the phobia tests again, and I did them again the following year. I still didn't. But in the meantime, I was supposed to have done police tactical unit, which I hadn't done. And all officers have to do PTU. So the guys you're seeing on the TV, the frontline guys in the riot, will be most likely police tactical unit, supported by emergency unit, and then supported by people who used to be in, having been trained, and they form a company, or they're part of sent from a division to support. So and so PTU was without doubt the best job I did in the police. You go in, you do your training as a platoon commander, and you do so you do all the training first, and then you get 40 PCs who come in, and then you're their platoon officer, and you train them. So it's not like they're trained by there are PTU staff, but the PTU staff have trained the platoon officers and the platoon NCOs first, and then the PCs turn up, and then you train them. And so a company, I don't know what it is in the army, but a company will be 4 platoons of 40, made up of roughly 40 people, and there'll be columns and sections.
Very simple.
So the columns, the sections will be, the first one used to be shields, and then the second one would be smoke. So a 1.5 inch federal gun with a smoke round in, pretty similar to what they're using still on the streets. The third section would be a baton round. It used to be a wooden baton, which you're supposed to fire on the ground, and it bounces up and takes your kneecaps out or stops you doing what you're not supposed to be doing. And the 4th section was a firearm section. So it'd be Colt AR-15, so a 5.56, high velocity weapon, and shotguns. And the shotguns in those days had, we used to have number 1, number 2 shot, and something called rifled slug, which is basically a big lump supposed to be for taking locks out and things. And that's all we had in those days. And the reason for the number 2 shot is you know, it's I mean, you could call up number 4 section to shoot rioters. And the idea in the Hong Kong police, unlike when I was in the Met, you know, and in the Met I was at Broadwater Farm when Blakelock got hacked. I was not in district support unit. I was in a police station, and we got called up on the late turn, as they call it, or B shift in Hong Kong. And we formed up a transit van and went up there into hell, chaos. And in those days, it's just a shield. You know, you lock the shields together, and you're close to the rioters, and they're pummeling you and firing stuff at you, and it's just mayhem all night. Horrible, nightmare.
It's
anyway. So in Hong Kong, it's different. Yeah, sorry.
No, just a point. It's funny, when I did that in the Marines. Well, so we trained for the riot squad, obviously, for when we went to Northern Ireland, and we got quite a few riots while we're in Northern Ireland. Don't ever remember me having to go out with the shield, but we did go out to sort of quell riots, or quash riots. But it's so funny, in your head, that person, they really are the enemy, and you're so self-righteous. You know, there's no thinking of it from 2 perspectives. So
not at all, because we in London, going back to the London days, so we had Brixton riots, we had the miners' strike. I went up 5 times to the miners' strike, never saw anything, slept most of the time, and went out drinking when I wasn't sleeping. And on the miners, because you did 16 hours a day, so there was all this, you know, people wanted to go up because they made overtime money. But those London ones, the Wapping dispute, you know, the newspaper one, we were out there, Broadwater Farm, Acton used to go up every now and again. I was at Ealing, so Acton was the district next to us. It was crazy days. You know, you just stood there and just got things pummeled at you. I just still, to this day, there were no firearms. That, you know, there were firearms teams back in those days, but you know, they were never deployed. And I presume there was Federals. I saw them we used to train at Hounslow in West London, and there'd be all these. It's not like the close quarter battle range we trained on in Hong Kong. It was like a mini village, in like a mock-up town. You know, you do room entries and tortoises and go in, and the enemy are throwing wooden bricks at you and petrol bombs. I remember forever there were a lot of petrol bombs, and you know, we used to put the shield down and the visor, tuck it here, otherwise the flames came up, took your whiskers off. And that was the stuff we did in London. And London was, I always think it was violent. It was very violent in my day, you know. And we were unarmed, and we got and it was not uncommon to get getting beaten up. I got beaten up many times in London back in those days.
PC
Keith
Blakelock was, sorry, Rupert, just for our younger viewers, PC Keith Blakelock was an officer who was ordered onto the Broadwater Farm estate when rioting was occurring in the Afro-Caribbean community there. So the estate was, I'm guessing it was blocks of flats, probably a lot of sort of, you know, on the border of poverty and this sort of thing. A lot of friction with the Met Police and the residents. And during this this big, huge disturbance, possibly a riot, I can't remember, PC Blakelock got decapitated, set about by a gang of, I'm going to assume men, but who knows. And I think someone took a machete, and finally, after being stabbed to death, they chopped his head off. It was, when I was a kid, that was quite a thing. I can still see his face now on the front of every newspaper. Shock.
No, it was horrific. And when our cereal arrived, it's like a war zone. You know, the burning, the smell, chaos. The radio was the thing that was disturbing, because there were not peak calls for urgent assistance coming up, and you know, so in the Met you've got two radio systems, one from New Scotland Yard, you know, we called MP, and then you had your divisional radio, and then all the radios were going up, and the information room at New Scotland Yard was trying to control things, and the various, I know things have moved on, it's a long time ago. It was terrible, and what I understand, or what I know, Keith Blakelock and his group were trying to escort or protect firemen who were trying to put out a fire. And when they got ambushed and they retreated, and there was sort of high rises with lots of stairways in between. And in between the high rises was a lot of grass, and there was one on a slope on the grass. He slipped. I think he got set on. I think it's about 10 in the evening, because we got there just after it happened. We got formed up after the late. I was on a late turn at Ealing, and we formed up because I had been on the district support unit before then, as we all had to do. And so the DSU trained, so riot trained officers were all called up from the reliefs, you know, the foot patrol guys, to form up extra serials. So a serial is basically 2 transit vans, inspector, sergeant in each one, and PCs like myself. And I was in Ealing, so we got there. It was not far to Tottenham, and we went up there in blues and twos. And even before getting, you could see the piles of smoke going up. It was terrible. And then when the radio calls came out, and all the sort of, you know, gossip amongst us, because we're all, you know, standing behind, getting out of the vans, or getting back in, or getting out, or redeployed, or move over here, or go there. You know, the rumours went along the line that one officer had gone down, and and then later things unfolded, and we found out about the brutal way in which he was murdered.
Shock must have just had a shock effect through the force.
It was the same time Yvonne Fletcher, just a little bit before, I think 84, Yvonne Fletcher had been murdered. I think is it the Libyan embassy? It was crazy times. The Met was sort of, lurched from, and I spent a lot of my time on area cars, so the SD1 Rovers back in those days, and I was an operator. I yearned to be a Class 1 driver and drive one of those at 100 miles an hour down the wrong side of Ealing Broadway, but I was the operator, and used to work the radio, and the stuff we respond. That was those. I think maybe it's the same today, that they have area cars, but I was on a car called X-Ray 2, which was Ealing's. X-Ray 1 was Acton. X-Ray 3 Southall, and we could go on to other people's ground, and we just went from one crazy thing to the other. And that was it. And then I'd sort of got to 23. It's either I was thinking of special branch. I failed the first exam, and I was thinking to go back and do it again. And then there's that 5-year mark. You're thinking of promotion to sergeant, and actually, there's a guy who used to be a professional. He was on my relief. He used to be a professional footballer, and he was playing football for the Met, and he'd gone up to Hong Kong and told me all the stories, and that was it. I applied him immediately. After all the stories he told.
The seed was planted.
The seed was planted. What a special place it is, anyway.
Oh, incredibly. And again, I'll say this for the benefit of people that don't know the history of Hong Kong. The British traders in the days gone by used Hong Kong as because it formed the perfect harbour. They used to park their trading ships there, and they'd bring opium from India, and they'd put the opium into the mainland, and they'd take silver in return, which caused an enormous problem. And I think it caused a series of war called the Opium Wars. And finally, they managed to get I'm going to say the Emperor of China, I don't know who exactly was, but to cede Hong Kong Island, and the new territories to the British on this 100-year lease that Rupert mentioned. And of course, when they signed the paper...
Forever. It was ceded forever.
Oh, okay.
Hong Kong Island was ceded
the island,
forever. Yeah. It's only later the new territories, well, obviously in, when was it, 1898. So it'll be the 1830s, 1820s when the Opium Wars. So is it opium for tea? That's what it is. Tea, the British couldn't pay for their tea with silver anymore. So they decided to pay for it with opium, which they, you know, it was an addiction at that time, and to an extent continued to be, you know, as opium formed number 3, heroin number 4, and so forth.
And that's quite something. Quite something in itself, Rupert. The opium dens. Did you come across any of them in your day?
Yeah. Well, later on after done, I was in a task force. I was in Chiwan-san, and all we did is kick down doors for drugs. Complete waste of time. It's just, you know, I know, you know, I have a later on, I've got a, you know, I did a degree in criminology, and you could write essays about decriminalization of drugs and blah, 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 you know, get easy, you know, all that sort of stuff. And it, you know, I saw it firsthand, I could go on for hours and hours about drugs in Hong Kong. It's just, you know, what we would, in that task force, so we would get an informant, find out where there's a packing or a distribution center. You know, they used to put the heroin, number 3 heroin, into, or number 4 in those days, into straws, seal at each end. And we would then, or I would plan a raid, kick down the door and arrest powder, stuff going out of the windows, down lavatories, all that stuff. And then arrest, you know, the guy, interrogate them, find out, if you can, where they got their stuff from. And he went on and on and on. It's just, I mean, these estates were awful. You know, you've ever seen them. As, you know, I'd be on it if I was had to live in it, I think.
Oh,
it's just,
when you go into some of those outlying, I'll say villages, but it gives it the wrong impression in your mind, but they're just basically blocks of flats that just ugly and a lot of
tiny boxes with metal, almost like prison cells, you know, and there's all sorts of things, and it was rough. It was rough for people. You know, when I first, you know, when I was in those early days, there was still the squatter huts on the hillsides, you know, from the people who've escaped China. You know, I in PTU, we had the Vietnamese boat people, the camps, and we responded to a huge riot at High Island camp, you know, just north and south, killing each other, you know, with homemade swords. Literally, it was crazy. So there was, you know, Hong Kong's been through a hell of a lot of change, a lot of things over the years. People forget, you know, it's this recurring theme through life now that people forget the history, you know, how turbulent things are and how things became the way they are. And, you know, in a way, you know, Hong Kong's been built on you know, turmoil and drugs trade and refugees from the Cultural Revolution back in the day. It's had its own riots in 1967, big riots in Hong Kong, which, you know, it used to be the Hong Kong police. And then after 67, and the Queen bestowed the affixed royal to the Hong Kong police in 67. And then the royal was taken off in 97. And now they're back to Hong Kong police again. But you forget what a turbulent time. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating place to have spent time, especially to have been in the colonial days, you know, to be the last of the colonial police sort of thing.
I'm so happy, Rupert, that I was first there in 92, and it was obviously not a very different place to, but the landscape, the architecture was obviously very different. The culture seemed so much richer there. all the etiquette and the superstition and the cuisine and the triads obviously were more sort of a, you know, more on street level, as it's all gone to sort of designer crime now. The straw.
It's you know, all those bright flashing lights, the neon lights, and they have them now. You know, they have lasers. But if you go, you know, I also live in Shanghai. I mean, that waterfront puts Hong Kong to shame. I mean, you know, Pudong waterfront with 3D dimensional, you know, patterns in the sky and everything. Absolutely incredible. I don't think people realize what China, the first tier cities, Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, you know, Guangzhou, what they're like, how high tech they are compared to, you know, I've traveled extensively in the States. You just can't believe it. This is why all this stuff in the press about China, I just shake my head. They just don't understand it.
What's your interpretation then, Rupert, of China, with respect to this?
Well, I mean, going forward a bit, I went into forensic accounting and investigation after I left the police, and then I had enough. I just said I can't do it, and I went to university in Beijing to study Mandarin. You know, I thought I've got to learn it, and the only way to learn it is to immerse myself. I did a few courses and it was terrible. Didn't learn anything, and then I said, right, that's it. Resign, start afresh. Middle-aged student in Beijing. What could go wrong? And I threw myself into it. And you know, I'm not fluent, but I'm pretty good, and I learned to read and write it. And traveled extensively around China. Made a lot of friends. Lived in a monastery in Yunnan, learning Tai Chi Chuan and all this stuff. Had a great time. Great 2 years of my life, not wasted. An investment really for what I do today, because I think that going back to China, I think people don't realize, you know, 1.4 billion people, so 1 in 5 people on the planet is Chinese. You know, it's going to be the number one economy. That's what the tension is at the moment. It will be the number one economy in the world. You've still got half who are peasants, and then you've got another 700,000 plus who are middle class now. I mean, in the last 30 years, people have not only, you know, come out of poverty, or half of them at least, but thriving. I mean, you could say there's 300-400, the population of America and Europe, who are middle class in China. And I say middle class meaning they have disposable income, and, you know, they can buy cars and go on foreign holidays and all that stuff. And that's happening now. That's at the stage. And then you've got the rich, and you got the super rich, and then you got the Jeff Bezos rich that you never hear about. I mean, serious wealth. And then you got a whole, well, is this communism or is it a stage? You know, you go through capitalism to get to communism or whatever. I mean, it's a planned economy. It's got one party. Things get done. You know, they say, right, we need a canal bringing water from the south to the north. They just make it. And then in the UK, they're going on about whatever it is, HS2, and you know, who's in this arguments, and you know, the budget slipped and blah blah blah, and what do we want, the environmental impact, or is there any benefit to it? China, they go, right, the south is wet, the north is dry, build an enormous canal, send it and they do it. And the cities go up. I mean, there's a lot of bad things, you know. I don't like the cruelty, I don't like the corruption, I don't like the animal cruelty, the environmental things, you know. I don't care for that. But on the other side, it's a fascinating place to spend time. And, you know, I've just got a little insight into the history and culture and the people. You know, it's such a big country, and the cities. I mean, Shanghai, well, there's 25 million people in that one city. It's ridiculous.
How's it going to be? Because when I was there 20 years ago, everybody had a bicycle. There was a rarity to own a car. Yeah. Now it sounds like everybody's not just buying one car, but they're going to move on to buying their second car. How does that put us, along with all the industrialization with respect to pollution?
Oh, it's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know,
that's...
it's just, I mean, the you know, on one side there's the benefit of pulling people out of poverty and their, you know, their development, their economic development. They make everything there. I mean, the phones we're using, and you go to Walmart or Target in the US, about 99% of it is made in China. They're making all the stuff. And all these factories, I'm often working in them, you know, investigating fraud and corruption for US clients or European clients. But it's yeah, it has an impact. I mean, I think I just read today that China has said in 2050 it's you know, it's pledged to be carbon neutral, and there's a lot of people saying, oh well, they can just say that, they probably won't, but I bet they do. I mean, the electric cars and stuff and things, you know, solar panel. You know, what do we need now? We need batteries that last longer. All the Elon Musk type stuff that we're pretty familiar with, all the things that he's trying to do. Solar panels, battery life, you know, renewable energy, wind, sea turbines and all that. They're doing it. There's huge areas where they're doing it. The university I went to, which is called Tsinghua University in Beijing, it's a science museum. You know, super smart guy. I mean, I went there learning Mandarin. I was, you know, probably the thickest guy within the walls, but definitely. But they were really, you know, I had lunch, you know, practiced my Mandarin with these you know, students who were the best of the best of the best of the best. And some of them have never met anyone better than them in their life before they went to university, and they're studying, you know, sort of nuclear physics or some sort of, you know, high-end engineering degrees, you know. And it's surprising, and yeah, I can see the you know, the criticism. I can sort of understand the politics behind it, you know, between America and China. But I bet behind the scenes, everyone's trying to trade. Trade wars. They're trading. It's trading behind the politics, which keeps all us lot.
Behind the politics and behind the scenes, you'll find the Babylonian money mafia controlling the whole damn show.
Gonna have to look at that one.
It's interesting, Rupert, because I think it's hard for people here who haven't had the experience of going out into that part of the world to really understand. This was a country that was behind a great wall for thousands of years. My history's not good, but a long time it was shielded off from the west with an ocean one side, and you know, this wall the other side, and an enormous mountain range to the north. Well, it's the Mongolia, isn't it, to the north? You got the Himalayas shielding it here, a huge desert to the north, and the people lived in peasantry for all of this time, being dictated to by these dynasties that obviously shielded them from even further from the outside world and this kind of thing. And
when you think of it, sorry, Chris.
No, I was just getting to, Rupert, that when I was young, I was quite naive. I thought, oh, Chinese people, they're just Chinese people with a yellowy skin and a different eyes. We're all the same. My experience in Hollywood, in Hong Kong, Hollywood, haven't been there yet.
Hollywood Road.
Hollywood Road, yes, Hong Kong. But my experience there, part of the reason it hurt me so much was to get to a certain time in my stay there when I realized, oh gosh, we are so different. And I don't know, I'm just going to have to say this. I'm sorry if it sounds rude, but the Hong Kong Chinese were so much more animalistic than and I'm not saying England's perfect, and that's not what I'm saying here, folks. I'm just saying we are very developed in England because we've had culture from all around the world for hundreds of years through through our trading and our invasions and our occupations and this kind of thing. And you're talking a country with 6 billion people, the vast majority of whom still believe that powdered rhino horn is good for your sex life. And the reason I'm saying this is you've got to put development alongside this mentality. It's like my friend said to me ages ago, he'd been in Bangkok and he went, Chris, Bangkok pollution, they don't give a over there. It's you know, drink, chuck that in the, there's no. So I would say I hope the government have this great plan, and I hope they have the ability to implement it onto this mindset. And again, if people think I'm being extreme, no, I've met people traveling through the places that we're talking about, like Guangzhou, Shenzhen, that saw babies doped up and laying in begging bowls, some of them with their legs broken so that they couldn't crawl away, right? This is, my friend was on a train in China, you might have heard me say this, the police came on board, grabbed a suspected pickpocket, no trial or nothing, just shot him in the head on the platform, right? And just trying to highlight here very different mindset. And I'm not saying, you know, I'm not saying it should be the same as ours or that we're better or anything like that. Just making the point that, wow, if all of those 6 billion people want their first car and then they want a second car and then they want their disposable McDonald's, and, you know, who's setting the example there? And they want to throw all that plastic and rubbish into the oceans, we would have a serious problem.
I think, yeah, I mean, it's some of the worst things I've seen are there, but also some of the, you know, the best. I mean, some of the countryside, some super smart people there, but some real idiots too. I mean, some really nasty, you know, selfish. I like the dog meat festival in, where's that place? You know, I just find I can't come to terms with that kind of thing.
Oh, the animal torture as well. It was the same in Hong Kong. If you're a cat, it's just hit that cat, smack it around the head and kill it, chuck it away and laugh. There was no value on not, of course it's not everybody, but this was a thing. The other thing as well, when I worked as you'll get to this part in my book, Rupert, when I got the job as DJ in China, my first, when I went for the interview for the job, my Hong Kong manager, who managed this huge nightclub on the mainland, I took the slow boat over there, hopped into this Mercedes. I'm chatting to this manager and I said, is there much crime in China? He went, opened his jacket. He's got his Smith & Wesson in there, lifts the flap of the driver. He's got his Beretta. And he said, Quissa, they call me Quissa. He said, if you get the job, Mr. Wong here will be your bodyguard. And I'm like, Mr. Lee, I'm a former Royal Marine. I don't need a bodyguard. He said, no, Chris, in China, Chinese criminal kill you first, then see if you have money. Like, basically, you know, they don't give a you know what. Again, I'm not generalizing here. I'm just giving specific examples of my own experience. But, yes.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of. It's such a huge country. There's so many different aspects to it. I mean, if you go into Shanghai now and say eating dog meat, they will be horrified. 99.99999% of people will be absolutely horrified. I mean, all kind, you know, dressed up poodles and tutus and stuff, you know, and, you know, they're absolutely. So you've got that side. The rhino horn, you say, I got involved in a little bit of, you know, intel work on rhino horn distribution channels, and the rhino horn issue is there's always going to be a market. Always. You'll never educate. You can educate, how are you going to because already 99.999% of Chinese think rhino horn is just ground up fingernails. That's what most Chinese think. But that small fraction is still a huge number to, to create a market. And they're not, it doesn't necessarily mean that that small percentage is ignorant. They just want it the same way as having the $10,000 bottle of, fine French wine or whatever to show off, or to show face or whatever. And the implications of that is that if it carries on in that rate with the, with the value on a rhino horn, it'll be extinct. I mean, there's certain species of rhino are extinct. I have one life in South Africa too. I have a house in South Africa, and right on the southern tip. And I've got friends who've got Afrikaner friends who've got game reserves, and I sort of got in my hiding rhinos from the poachers, moving them around into Free State or wherever they go, from Limpopo, and moving them around to try and protect them, to keep them alive, to keep the bloodline alive. It's terrible when you think of the poverty there, and there's an animal wandering around with more than its the horn is worth more than its gram per gram than gold. It's so expensive, and then it goes through the gangs, and they have these. I'm not going to. There's certain provinces of China which will specialize in this, and they will have front businesses in South Africa, for instance, or Zimbabwe or Botswana. And then it's the same as smuggling any illicit substance. There are ways of doing it. I mean, there's going through hiding it, concealing it, everything you can think. All the ways you can think have been trying to get it through. And I've scratched my head about it, and I got involved in it, and I got it. In the early days thought, well, what can I do to help in this situation, and get involved in the conservancy groups and the things like this that you all read about. And I've come to the conclusion the only thing is unless they, are farmed in the same way as sheep and cattle, they're gonna die. Unless you do that, that's what I've come to. I know lots of people disagree with this point of view, but unless they have value, and you can protect them, and it goes all the way down to the value chain. You raise them, look after them, they have value. It's worth the security for them, and blah, 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 all the way through to, because the idea that you can stop the demand with a China which is in its ascendancy in wealth, so that small percent, as small as it is, they will clear them out. They'll become extinct. I mean, I met this Chinese guy, and I had a little bit of a ruck over tiger penises, believe it or not. And I said, what happens if you ate the penis of the last tiger on the planet? And he said, I'll be very lucky. Yeah. I mean, when you're dealing with that mindset, what can you do? How are you going to win?
You've got that thing as well, haven't you? Is that in the game reserves, they thought it would be a good idea to take a chainsaw and chop the horn off the rhino.
Yeah.
And then the poachers just said, well, we'll kill that rhino anyway, because we might spend a whole day tracking these tracks only to find it's a rhino with no horn. That's going to waste our time. So it's a
well, they are taking, they thought it might affect the behavior and so forth. It's not my area of expertise, but they do cut the horn in places like Namibia and those sort of places where they roam around wild still in parts of Namibia. I spent a lot of time in Namibia. But the poachers will still, the nub, it still goes down deep into the skeleton, and they'll still kill it just to get that nub out as well. and it goes off. I mean, it's worth so much. And I think going back to China and all those things, you know, you say, oh, well, they'll become enlightened and they're not going to do these things and cruelty to animals and no, it's not going to change. Not in I can't see in several generations. It's not going to, that mindset is not going to change. I mean, if you look at if you go to Taiwan, have you been to Taiwan?
It's funny enough, it's one place in Asia. I think it's the only country in Asia I've not been to.
Well, I could get myself in trouble here, but I always think Taiwan is where China behaving well, responsibly. You know, it's got a democracy. It's got, you know, it's cultured. It's got art. It's a great place. Fantastic food, lovely people. They speak Mandarin sort of slower, so I can understand. Yeah, it's a very, very nice place, Taiwan. Very, very nice place. And I enjoy going to Taiwan. It's a beautiful island, you know, mountains all the way down the backbone of it. I paraglide there a lot. So I go there in a motorcycle and go around looking at things and eat.
Wow.
I enjoy it very much. And Taiwan, it could be, you know, there's the risk that China's going to be so powerful it'll just absorb, take back Taiwan, which it lays claim to. And essentially it is part of China historically, or whatever, however you want to slice and dice it, it is. But you know, you got the situation. I mean, it's a complex situation. I think it's got to be treated really, really carefully, because it could be the catalyst for real trouble in the Far East.
Is it Mandarin in Taiwan?
Yeah. There's an indigenous people. You know, there weren't Chinese people there. There's a sort of, they look a little bit like Filipinos, to be honest. They've got that kind of look, and they've got their own language. But everyone speaks Mandarin, and you know, I enjoy going there. I'm pretty fond of art, and I go to the National Museum in Taipei. And if they hadn't plundered it, it wouldn't exist, because during the Cultural Revolution, a lot of art was destroyed in China. So this beautiful, you know, all the history of China is maintained through some of these beautiful museums they've got in Taipei. I mean, there are lovely, you know, some nice museums in the Capital Museum in Beijing is great. It's very interesting. But going back to, you know, you said about the you know, the history of China, it is incredibly complex. I mean, there's all these dynasties, all these warring times and factions. You know, the terracotta soldiers in Xi'an, Emperor Qin, he was around at the same time as Julius Caesar. So he's the same time, 2,000 years ago. You know, and so there's this enormous, that time 2,000 years ago is the sort of unification of China. And then the issues, you know, I'm not going to get into it, Xinjiang and Xizang, Tibet. It's a complex issue. It's not, as who's the actor who's in Officer and a Gentleman? Richard Gere. Yeah. And he said, oh, you know, Tibet. If you go back further, Tibet had invaded, same with the Mongols, they had invaded China. And it's retreated backwards and forwards over time. And I've traveled all those areas. I mean, there's the provinces of Gansu, Qinghai, Yunnan, Sichuan. I've been to all these provinces on my motorbike with my missus. I've traveled all over. It's full of Muslims, full of Buddhists, full of Han Communist Chinese, all living together quite peacefully. I mean, Tibet's sort of now, it's become politicized. I don't think it's politicized because of, you know, by the Chinese, politicized by everyone outside. So I got in, you know, I'm riding around Tibet. You know, I'm in motorcycle gear, so I can't tell. I got you know, I'm looking over. I went to the base camp of, or the Chinese side of Everest. I was on the Tibet Qinghai Plateau and the most sacred lake. I went to this source of the Yangtze, Mekong, and Yellow River, camping out on 4,000 meters. Unbelievable. And then up into Qinghai, which no one's ever heard of. You know, the forbidden, the lost, what's it called? It's the Lost King. You know, people just don't go there. You know, it's all that history of the Silk Road and trading and Marco Polo. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And this Xinjiang thing, well, China will say it's a domestic issue, and they're dealing with their issues themselves, or whatever they perceived, terrorism or secularism or whatever it is, or whatever anti-revolutionary or whatever it is that they say it is. China will always say that it's a Chinese issue, just for China to deal with, and the rest of the world will, if they knew exactly. It comes back to the media thing. If you could rely on proper investigation, unbiased investigation to find out exactly what's going on, which doesn't exist anymore because everyone's got an agenda. Mm-hmm. So what's the point in an unbiased? Well, who are those people? They're not employing people. No one's employing independent investigators like me to go and do that stuff. They're getting investigative journalists who are paid by whoever, the BBC or CNN or whatever. And you just don't even, I'll say, okay, I know the reporting on Hong Kong riots was inaccurate and biased. And then you see Belarus, and then my head goes, is the reporting bias there too? I don't know.
It is. Of course it is, because it's all controlled by the same ancient order that goes back 8,000 years, and nobody understands this. So they just see the kind of fruit on the tree, and they're arguing with this, these bunch of grapes. And as we all know, if you ever want to tackle a root cause or a problem, you look at the root.
Yeah.
Like you say, I don't think I've watched mainstream media for 20 years since the events in New York. Clearly, well, that's all been exposed now for anyone who's interested to find out. But if they can lie to you on that big and to that huge an extent, if that's not a wake-up call for you, then you're probably not going to get one. But Rupert,
it's a sad. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No. You finish your
No. I'm waffling.
I just wondered if we could go back to the Triad thing, because obviously that's very close to home for me. For people who aren't familiar with my story, I left the Royal Marines to go and run a business in Hong Kong. It was all fairly successful at the time, and within about 6 or 7 months, I was chronically addicted to crystal meth, and I was phasing in and out of clinical psychosis at the same time as getting a job for the 14K, who Rupert and I have discussed, who is the Triad criminal fraternity or crime gang that run Wan Chai, which historically is the red light gangland nightclub district in Hong Kong, where all the sailors frequent when they come ashore on the big American and British ships, and which is personified, if that's the right word, by the book The Legend of Susie Wong. And I got a job working for the 14K as a nightclub doorman, and I saw a lot of fortunately I didn't, in my fragile mind state, I didn't do anything too stupid while I worked there, but I certainly saw another side of life, the criminal side of life, the thug side of life, the disenfranchised side of life. These gangs recruit from young men who have no prospects in life and who feel they have no family and no direction. And it was interesting, but I left Hong Kong with a lot of questions. The most burning one was, who is this foreign triad? And again, you'll have to, where is my book? There it is. if you want to know more about this, you're welcome to obviously grab a copy of my memoir, Eating Smoke. But one of the things I came across while working in this club in Wan Chai was a clique of expats that all seemed to be in cahoots with the Chinese gang. And because of my mind state at the time, I was never quite sure. I came away really kind of second guessing. Did I see what I thought I did? People would say to me in Hong Kong, the Triads will work with anyone. Doesn't matter who you are, so long as you can make money for them. You're never going to become a Triad because they only recruit from Chinese blood and don't even trust Chinese people that have been abroad. And so there I was I left Hong Kong in 96, wrote my memoir in 2011. So what's that, 15 years? 15 years later, I'm researching for my book, and I typed into a search engine, the foreign triad. And lo and behold, it came up with a magazine article written by a chap called Bill Sparrow for a publication. I think it was called the Asia Sex Gazette, which was a bit random in itself. And I'm reading this article and I'm starting to get deja vu. It's about this guy, Bill Sparrow, who walks into a nightclub in Hong Kong while he's over there on some sort of business. And he gets chatting to a Filipino barmaid, and he says, "Oh, what's that tattoo on your arm?" And she says, "Oh, nothing." He said, No, come on. He said, "Oh, well, if you must know, I was a member of the foreign triad." So Bill's like, what's that then? She said, "Oh, it's a clique of Westerners that run all sorts of errands for the main triad." And to say it rocked my world, Rupert, was an I mean, I'd gone 15 years of my life thinking, what the hell was going on in that nightclub? Why did my friends seem to all be doing really well for themselves? Why were a lot of them, openly bragging about the drugs that they were selling in these clubs, but they weren't triads? And it all got very confusing, and obviously I was mentally unwell at the time, which compounded the issue. So maybe I ask you, did you come across anything like that, Rupert?
I came across foreign criminals a lot. There are all sorts of gangs. I came across, I sort of stumbled in when I was in uniform in Jim Sa Joy. There's a nightclub called the Big Apple. I think it was in Nathan Road, and it was run by Western mamazans. So the mamazans, all those nightclubs, they have a mamazan, right, who runs it, and they've got the girls, and they come in and out, and there's, they dance on tables, and you buy them drinks or whatever. But they sort of run by these mamazans who keep a very strict eye on what's going on. And in those days, there were Western girls. Now you couldn't really say they had been inducted. They were working for Triads, but they weren't inducted into a Triad organization as on that particular case. This was a bad case. This was about supplying. This is a paedophile ring right up into government, and a lot of people will know about this case in Hong Kong, or people, other policemen and stuff will know about this paedophile case involving judiciary and all sorts of things. Run out of these nightclubs, but there are also foreign criminals. So saying a foreign triad, unless you see the sort of Chinese character or the Chinese name or the affiliation or whatever they were, or the symbol or whatever, it's very difficult for me to say that. And I didn't specialize in triads. In each of the stations there would be a regional, there'd be district crime squad and district triad squad as well. And that would be, we used to think that the OCs of those squads would have to be triads themselves, of a different triad, right, in order to be inside and so forth. I mean, we were used as expats. I was used a couple of times to do undercover stuff, fake Rolexes and that sort of stuff, and get approached on Nathan Road or whatever, and they go back to their lair and buy all these, and then we'd raid it. Customs or so I did, and there was a few guys who did undercover drug stuff. There was the famous. There's a great book by one of my colleagues called Les Bird about Marine, and it's called A Small Band of Men. Very, very interesting book. And he describes this, them undercover on this ship that's transporting heroin to Australia. And whether the guys were affiliated, who'd gone through, the ceremony thing, the Triads, difficult to say. I mean, it's very difficult to say if someone is a Triad. If they, by law, if you contain the things I said earlier, or you profess to be one, therefore you are one by Hong Kong law, and you will go and you will be prosecuted. If there's enough. You provide the evidence through the courts. But, there were lots of foreign criminals from all the usual suspects, from states, Russia, Philippines, other Southeast Asian countries, Japan. They're all mixing. I mean, when they're, drugs and contraband, they're trying to cross borders. So they're all clued together. So that's the drug side. There's the human trafficking, the slavery, modern slavery, all the girls from all over the world. It used to be the Philippines and Indonesia, Thailand, right? Mostly back in the day. And they would do a circuit around Southeast Asia to either, 4 floors of whores in Singapore all the way through, all the stuff. And it's human slavery. I mean, it's modern day slavery. It really is. They're trapped. You know how they're trapped. They're financially burdened to someone who has pretended to be a friend to them, and then they've turned on them. The usual, how you turn, got them hooked on drugs, or got them financially indebted, or threatening their family. All the usual things these shitbags use to control other human beings. And they'll be all from all over the world. And so what you said, you describe of having seen foreigners working closely with, known Hong Kong Chinese triads would be true. Whether they'd be inducted into, or whether they, because they're affiliated, they call themselves foreign triad. I didn't know of any groups. There was some suspicion that certain people, and I'm certainly not going to say it in social media, certain individuals were paid up, fully fledged members of triad groups, lawyers, cops, who were foreign. There were some rumors, strong rumors, that they were.
Yeah.
Well, but they'd be influential. There'd be lawyers, accountants, policemen.
Anybody that does any sort of business in Hong Kong. I mean, I'm thinking like the movie industry was famous being run by the Triads, wasn't it?
Well, it was. I think it's open the shore, that empire from Clearwater Bay. I think, it was another form of, all the way through from Miss Hong Kong to get into, starlet to get into the movies. In my day, I had a spell before I went off to PTU in playing clothes where, we came across in Jimsy, did you remember a singer called Anita Mui? She's a famous, some movies about her, and she was a famous Hong Kong singer. A lot of the famous Hong Kong stars were alleged to be, all that stuff.
Andy Lau was the big name when I was there, and he was alleged to have affiliations.
But it's a matter of, have you, we'd often catch, some, hooligans, for want of a better word, youngsters, getting up to the usual teenage crime stuff. And they would say, I'm I'm, my big brother is such and such, who's a Triad, and there's sort of recruitment through the ranks and so forth. So that did go on for local, but because what I understand, it's a very not sort of family, but nationalistic group. If you're not ethnically Chinese, it could be difficult to do to be fully in.
Yeah.
Unless with some, I imagine, some rare exceptions, and maybe people in your, who may, Hong Kong policemen may watch this, because I'm on it, and may put in your comments, and you may get some interesting comments from people who elaborate on some of this detail. But there were a lot of, as I said, in gangs and human trafficking, money laundering, all the way through into the finance side of things, dodgy construction projects, getting things through. It could be all the way through into the Legislative Council. That it's alleged that there are criminal links. Did you see,
what was the sort of worst Triad-related instance? There was one, as I think I wrote in my book, there was my friend who worked Chim Sa Choi's side, so Kowloon's side, in a nightclub there.
My Nick, yeah.
Yeah, and Sunny Yon territory. So I worked in 14K territory. He worked for the Sunny Yon, and he got chopped up really badly. One night, just a transit van pulled up, 8 or so Triads jumped out the back with meat cleavers, and they really did a job on this guy.
The meat cleaver chopping, we called them chopping. Even in the Chinese called them choppings. So they would impose their will on, for whatever reason. They may have what they call a settlement talk, where they sit down in a restaurant and they either resolve it or it doesn't resolve. And if it doesn't resolve, they all the meat cleavers, and they call up their gang. All the guys are waiting around, and they all pile in. And we used to get called up, and they're all hacking away at each other with meat cleavers. This was often when I was in because I'm 999 emergency response. Would turn up, and they're all fingers all over the place. They'd all have, the defensive scars, on the shoulders, the usual chopping wounds. You would see them. There's loads of, you see old boys my age or older, they got their shirt off in the summer. They've got all the, the hacks. In Kowloon City, I responded, we never used the lifts. We used to run up. So we'd respond in this sort of way. We'd put a cordon round, run up the staircase, sweep down, right? That was our normal response in EU and PTU. We're going up the stairs. There's just fingers all up the stairs, chopping. It was common, and there were, from the robberies. So that 90 when you were there, that 90 to 93 when I was a platoon commander in emergency unit. So I finished on that chronology. So I've done my 1 year plus in PTU, where it's mostly training. You've got young guys and you're training, and there's a lot of training and so forth. But EU is first response. You're the first there. And it was just that period, and there's all of us. So not just the EU, there'd be traffic, it'd be the anti-smuggling task force. They're all on those DIFAs, that's 70 knot with 4 Mercury outboard engines. They used to steal the cars and get them up to China, and the police response was called the anti-smuggling task force, and they would also have these fast rapid raiders and helicopters and so forth to counter that. You got all the crime units, the regional crime units, the organized crime and Triad bureaus. So that's the sort of elite OGAE, they call it in Cantonese. You've got all that, and uniform as well. And all of us responding to mayhem of goldsmith robberies and the open fires that I had. And you're a former Royal Marine, and you've got people, I saw the other guy, the 4-5 commander guy you had on, talking about his time. Andy, yeah. Well, we were in gun battles with AK-47s, Black Star pistols, Type 54, 7.62 rounds, grenades. They were throwing grenades at us, stick grenades. One of the cases, one of the bad ones, is called my platoon. So there's four platoons in each region to cover the 3 shifts. So you got thrown in there. So we only have 1 day off a week. 6 days as a commander, you've got a slightly extended shift because you split your platoon in slightly, so there's an overlap so that you'll always respond. In our cars, we had AR-15, it was 5.56, a Remington shotgun, and we later changed. This was a game changer for us in these gun battles. We changed to 0.0 buckshot, and then we started killing them. Basically, that's it. I'll go on to that, but we were pushing. We changed the round in the .38 revolver to a heavy barrel with a stronger. I don't want to say dum-dum bullet because it's supposed to be illegal, but that's essentially kind of what it is. Stopping power to stop people doing things. But it was the 0.0 buckshot in our Remington shotguns, which really changed things because we could stop people dead on their tracks. And they had ballistic helmets, BRVs, AKs, Black Stars, grenades. These are
Triad smugglers, yeah.
Triads, goldsmith robbers. Goldsmith robbers.
Okay, right. So the
goldsmith robbers. So all those goldsmiths that you very eloquently described, these beautiful shops with all the gold in the front window, they just go in and rob it and stuff. And we had major gun battles. So I'll tell you some. So the Soihing Mahjong School, we're on what we call a B shift. I'm on the afternoon shift. And then the call came up, and then my Mongkok car, and so each region I got a car, which is generally patrolling around the whole of Kowloon. So I've got 13 cars. They were Mercedes-Benz, and then they'd have one plainclothes guy on, one sergeant, NCO, who was OC of the car, advanced driver, and one crew member. Who would carry the AR-15 shotgun or whatever, and then we'd have all emergency kit and the usual things, not too dissimilar, not as good as armed responses, but not too dissimilar. And that changed over time to MP5s and Glocks and as time moved on. But in my day, that's what we had. And so Mahjong, the they have all these. What they call them Mahjong schools, but they're basically clubs that you can go on, and 4 people table playing it. The robbers basically went in, I think there's about 4 of them, 4 or 5, locked the doors, and then proceeded to rob all the gold Rolexes and cash and wallets and stuff of everyone. Now in that robbery, they killed 2 people. One because he didn't get his Rolex off, he was sort of, so he just went bam, shot it in the head. We get there, we've cordoned the place. My platoon has cordoned this Mahjong school, but they came out and blasted us with AK-47s, absolutely blasted us. And one of my guys has got his shotgun, he's going bang, bang on an alleyway. I mean, the guy's coming towards him in one of those alleyways. He just kept running. And we had 0.0, we had birdshot in that shotgun, did nothing. The AR-15, which we carry, is as you know, it's a 5.56. It's a high velocity rifle. It had, it's a semi-automatic, so you got to keep, the bolt comes backwards and forwards and on the gas pressure, but you got to keep pulling the trigger. But we weren't allowed to use it. Headquarters banned us from using the AR-15 because it's high velocity and ricocheting in all the buildings and causing collateral damage. So we weren't allowed to use any really. The revolver, at first, when I first joined, we had 6 rounds only chambered in it. And it was weak arm. It was cross-draw on a lanyard tied around our Sam Brown. And so you go out, with the revolver. And then they said, oh, you can have 6 more rounds, which they gave to us in a Ziploc bag. 6 rounds in a Ziploc bag. So when the Soihing Mahjong School was going on, we have our revolver and 6 rounds in a Ziploc bag, extra rounds in a Ziploc bag. One of my drivers, a Mong Kok guy, who I remember always because his name was Fan Siu, which means sweet potato. Everyone's got a nickname. He was returning fire from behind the engine block at these robbers firing at him with an AK. And then he went, right, open up the plastic bag, get the bullets out. And then, so they've bashed themselves out and they've overrun our initial cordon. They hijacked a bus, carjacked a bus, I should say. We're chasing them. They're lobbing grenades at us out of the top floor of the bus. Now I'm in EOD CARDA all the time from, as I said, I was in EOD, and the EOD CARDA supported the full-time EOD explosive ordnance disposal team, which was about 4 or 5 people. In the early days, it was an ex-military guy, and a warrant officer called John Rollerson. He was the SBEO, Senior Bomb Disposal Officer. He's my boss. And he did a ridiculous number of tours in Northern Ireland, something like the most tours or something like that. And then he left, and then he came as a specialist into the police. And he was the last specialist to be in EOD, and then later we recruited within our CARDA to go into the full-time. So the CARDA, the full-time guys did ordnance and everything. Rocket, all those things, RPG and all the stuff we get and so forth, and shells from the Second World War. 500, 250,000, aircraft bombs. I mean, Hong Kong's littered with them from the Second World War. So you get, those would be dredged up when they were building the airport and all this sort of stuff. And then construction sites. So there's the ordnance side. But the CARDA was formed to deal with IEDs. So we were trained to do IEDs. So in my time, the government trained me to be a bomb builder. So I built every kind of IED, all your Northern Ireland ones, built the mainland, all that stuff, built them, learned how to build them, and then how to, what we call RSP, render safe. So, and we, for exercises and stuff. And I was also used in the enemy CARDA for CT exercises. So I got shot a few times by New Zealand SAS and SDU, and I kind of was on exercises and stuff because I was baddie. Good fun. Good fun. So I was in that CARDA. So we were trained up. It was tough training. It was good training. And I had a drink with a former EOD guy the other day, and I was saying, look, one of the things it put us, we learned how to problem solve. That's why I still got speed. So we learned how to, they taught us to appreciate issues and problem solve. Anyway, back to the grenades being, so I'm platoon commander responding to this and being outgunned on this gunback and this, this robbery. And dealing with liaising with the EOD team to all these, because not all the grenades were going off. These are these Chinese stick ones, you unscrew the end and it's got a igniferous fuse that you pull out, and sometimes it went off and sometimes it didn't. And so we had all these blinds all over, all over the streets. Anyway, the gang escaped, but they got subsequently arrested through other teams, other police teams, most regional crime squad, I think. And that was just one case, but we were having them regularly. I mean, one of my cars got in Shamshu Po. It was responding to a robbery, but they pulled up next to what we call the Tai Soi Jai, which is the lookout, and he put over 50 rounds into that car from an AK for 50 rounds. So it was a Mercedes-Benz van. And so later the ballistics put all these strings through, 50 rounds. The crew, none of them injured, all on the floor, a couple of glass shards, that was it. That vehicle was in Central Police Station for about for years, as an exhibit in this robbery with just these holes, because the rounds, because they're AK-47, they go through one, through and out again. And the ballistics guys, when they come along, you know, they look at the trajectory by, in those days, putting strings through to work out where it came from and work back the evidence. But we had loads of those cases. It was just a crazy period.
My
and
friend,
you know, yeah.
Sorry, a teacher I met, I did a bit of teaching over there, and one of my fellow teachers, he said, "Chris, what have you been doing in Hong Kong?" And I was like, "Oh, you don't want to know." He's like, "No, go on." I said, "I worked for the 14K in one of the Wan Choi nightclubs." So he was like, and he said, "What do you mean? I don't know about the 14K." He said, I was in a restaurant once. He said, just sat there, normal restaurant environment, everybody eating, you know, clatter or chatter of crockery and knives and forks. And he said, all of a sudden, on like some invisible signal, said all the men in the restaurant just stood up and just threw everything they could at one guy. Right. Yeah. This is again a revenge. Sounds like, you know, someone had been caused to lose face, and this was a revenge for making them lose face. The other thing I saw was a newspaper article, and they were really graphic. They didn't hold anything back on the front page of their newspapers there, the China Morning Post included. And this photo, I think it was on the roof of a building, and it was looking down into a stairwell, and filling this stairwell was a mother and a baby that had just been chopped to bits, and the photo just showed it, you know, showed it all. Yeah.
Well, those I had a run-in with the press, actually, hardly surprising, and it came down to, you know, I know the Chinese newspapers like all those graphic images of blood and guts and everything. And the South China, you know, they didn't really, the English, the standard South China didn't really show those kind of grisly pictures. I mean, sort of, they would always show, you know, action things of the police or a cordon or something like that. They just maybe show, you know, around a dead, you know, when there was one case where we'd shot this guy in Tokyo, and you could sort of see that there was something lying on the ground, but it wasn't graphic. But the Chinese ones would be right up there, you know. And I had a run-in because I responded to someone. We used to get a lot of people jumping from buildings, committing suicide, a lot. I mean, kids used to exams, and it was horrible. And as EU, and as an inspector, I'd have to be there to be first on scene to form an opinion as to whether the death was suspicious or not at that first instant. So I went to everything. I remember Harry going on about seeing dead bodies and all that stuff. I've seen pretty much everything. Anyway, this one it's partly Chinese hide away people with mental illnesses. If they've got kids, lock them in. They never used to let them, you know, sort of like you know, they never, it was a sort of, I don't know what it was, being ashamed or whatever, something to do with the culture, but they didn't openly, you know, let them wander around. It's got better, but in those days it was terrible.
Disabled.
Like if you got a disabled
kid
or something, you would lock them at home.
Yeah.
You wouldn't let them come out. Well, this you know, I turned up to this horrific scene of a exploded human being. A very, very, very obese person, fallen from 20 stories, just like a balloon. And you know, I did all this sort of investigation, went back where it came from, did the initial investigation, and then handed over to the scene to CID. But what had happened is this girl, you know, quite fat, quite obese, Down syndrome girl who's never let out, had just escaped and climbed through the bathroom window and fallen to her death. Anyway, the press came up, and you can imagine the scene is just horrific. And this guy was click, 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 and all this stuff, and I lost it. You know, unprofessional for a, you know, commander to do it, but I lost it and said, you know, told him what I thought and all this stuff. And so there was a standoff, and I almost got dragged off from this guy. And then his colleagues sort of pulled him away. And anyway, it got escalated to a senior one, my boss, who then, you know, and I said, "Oh, it's unacceptable. I'm not putting up with, you know, this kind of, the press doing this kind of stuff. This is a crime scene and blah, 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 and they're treading in it, and there's, you know, so." And so we had this sit down, and I can't remember which newspaper. It was one of the local, not Apple or something like this, one of the famous local papers. There's a proper, and so we had a sit down, and I said, "Look, from now on, I'll let you do your job, but when I say no, it's no. You don't come near my cordon taking pictures of dead children and, you know, stuff like this. It's not going to happen." And so that was just my, you know, me putting my standards on that situation. But it could be other bomb bans. You know, bomb ban is an inspector, could have a different interpretation of things. But for me, yeah.
Sorry, Rupert, were you around during the shark attacks?
Yeah.
About, I think it was 93. The first time.
Yeah.
I think it was actually this. It might have been 96. It might have been the first time I lived there on the foot.
Yeah. Tiger sharks.
Oh,
yeah.
It's incredible. And again,
yeah, they've been doing it. So there's a migratory pattern, you know, the geography of, bearing in mind, I have a house on the southern tip of Africa where there's great whites and Zambesis, bull sharks. Hong Kong, it is a rare, well, it wasn't that rare actually. There's quite a few people went missing. Again, talking to Les, who was in Marine, he talks about, you know, those eyes back in the day. They used to swim, you know, escaped China and then swim over in a dinghy, not a dinghy, inner tube. And then loads went missing through to sharks, apparently. And unless you know that someone's missing, account for someone and find the remains, you won't know. You know, just go down to, you know, to the remains in the deep. But those incidents with the tiger sharks was pretty. It caused I think later, I don't know about when you've been back to Hong Kong recently, all the beaches have shark nets on them nowadays. And funnily enough, because of this COVID, the government said there's no any gazetted beach is out of bounds now. You're not supposed to go there. So everyone is everywhere else except for where the shark net is. So everyone is on the beach. Everyone's just had enough of the lockdown, and so they're all on the beach. But the only place they're not is where the shark net, and the section of beach protected by the shark net, which is a bit ironic, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a shark. Yeah, those are big. There's a migratory pattern for those which I was told were tiger sharks. And there was a sort of, one of my friends, I founded the Hong Kong Paragliding Association in the early, 30 years ago actually. And the other founder, he was tasked, I believe, to go off and shoot the thing, but he never found it. I saw a shark paragliding at Sheko. I saw one. I called into the police, and I was flying around above a place called Dagala in Hong Kong, and I saw the silhouette of 2.5 meter shark. I mean, I've seen them before in South Africa, and I called it in. And 3 hours later, a marine launch came out. Gone. So they're there. Hong Kong has sharks. Yeah.
Yeah, that summer there was a diver they found with no legs. There was an old man, I don't know if it was Sheko Bay or so. It was one of the famous beaches there. He was an 80-year-old man that swam every day in the sea. He was taken. There was a chap pulled out of the sea by all his friends. And again, this is front page in a newspaper. His leg is just ripped into shreds. It looked like a rainbow of ribbons. And this guy's face, obviously in extreme shock. And as I say, this is front page of the newspaper. It put a bit of a different spin on things.
Did you go swimming again?
Do you know what? I never swam in Hong Kong during my whole time there. I was pretty land-based, mainly nightclub based.
All right.
I did a lot of dancing, not so much swimming. But yes. Rupert, listen, I'm acutely aware we haven't chatted about your motorcycle adventures, which I would dearly love to, and also your paragliding. But I think we better cut it short after what I think's been 2 hours now.
Oh, has it? My goodness, I could waffle.
It's not that I couldn't talk loads more. It's just I don't want people to go, oh, it's a 3-hour podcast, I won't bother watching that one. I'd rather do it in two parts, and we'll try and get all of them. But
yeah, it's great to catch up, and I'd just like to say, you know, what you're doing, you know, I have the highest respect. You know, I didn't mention it, but one of my colleagues, one of my hiking partners, is a former bootneck like yourself, 4-2 commander, fought in Falklands. I mean, I go hiking. I've heard, like your friend, was it Andy from 4-5, a very similar horrible, you know, fixed bayonet stuff going on. It's just horrific, and I think it has affected him. You know, post-traumatic stress all the way through, and the way people treat people as well. You know, I've had a run-in, and you know, he has good days, bad days, and I just think you should, you know what, maybe squaddies and cops are the same. You know, sometimes it can be gossip too much and be too judgmental on things. You know, and I think that's the main thing. You know, I got quite upset. I was sort of fallen out with one friend who was sort of on the phone. Oh, did you hear about such and that? And I said, why just ring me up about some bad news about, you know, this guy doing something or some misfortune that's gone, you know, because of he has his good days and bad days. Just be supportive. And so that was what I, you know, if there's any after all this waffling, that's you know, that's why I listen to, you know, what you've been through and what you've done, and it's a big, you know, kudos and respect, because it's I think there are people out there who just need support, and they think, oh, because you're a big tough X, this, that, and the other, you don't deserve it. And
military people could well do with remembering your military values that you were taught in training. And I say that because people forget I'm a traumatized veteran. Okay, my trauma came from when I was 4 years old, and probably a bit from what I experienced in Hong Kong, right? And I'm not a victim. I've never sought any kind of, you know, all my therapy I've done myself. I'm not suggesting other people do that, but it's just the way that I did it. But still, I get attacked by servicemen, and it's just like, grow up, you know, grow up. Don't you tell me how you know, how I live my life. I'm doing fine, but the hypocrisy of, oh, my door is always open for a fellow vet. It's like, they just don't understand it, you know, and it's something that needs to be addressed, because if you can't contact your old oppo for a bit of support because you're having a drug problem or you're drinking too much, and you know, those guys are going to judge you. Why do people think we're in a suicide epidemic? You know? Yeah. I think it's, you know, I'm as guilty. I was an arrogant bastard when I was young. You know, back in those days, you know, I was hungry. You don't come top by, you know, I won the awards and want to be best platoon in this. I was arrogant and unkind sometimes. And I think as I got older, I've realized, you know, you just got to be, you know, a bit of kindness, a bit of understanding now and again. And people and there's lots of them. And it's who you least expect sometimes as well, because they don't talk about it. I mean, he was I knew him because of EOD. We were in EOD. He's my oppo, and we trained together. You know, you were buddy system on EOD, and he got into a bit of this and that and the other, and you know, when he left the police, I think he joined 21 Regiment as a territorial one, I think, and then he came back out, and then he's in the security world and lives here with me, and we go off hiking and. You know, I'm interested when he wants to tell me the stories. I listen. I don't press him for, you know, I've known him for years. I didn't even know half the stuff about what he went through in down south. It sounds horrific. Awful. It's just the worst fighting
I've never, I don't know about First World War, it sounds awful, but just, I don't think people know. No. And what effect it has, can be, can affect you in different ways. And that's the only message, the stuff you're doing now, supporting people and trying to, whatever you can do to sort of improve your life, get out of it, keep busy and keep healthy.
Yeah,
be positive, give support, to be a bit kinder.
I'm going to try and get some courses online. I've got a very dear chap at the moment helping me set up a charity, so that when I do my charity adventures, I can use it for something that is going to be really constructive. Just a grassroots course that people who've been through the forces, that haven't had to think, sorry to say it, but haven't had to develop their spiritual side, their human side, because the forces is very much about keeping you trapped in your ego, because you've got to go and do animalistic things, and your ego is your low, what the Buddhists would call your lower self, so your animal self. And I want to help people develop their higher self, so they can detach themselves from this trauma, see life for what it is, and of course move on. So it's kind you say that I'm saying some of the right things, Rupert. Thank you. And let's continue our chat. Just stay on the line, because I've got a couple of things that I'd like to chat about. But your story is utterly amazing. It's certainly filled in a few gaps in how can you say?
we cross paths, but
yes.
I don't know. I'll ask it. Club Nemo, you said in your book. Is it Nemo, or is it?
Well,
Does it sound a bit nautical?
Yes, exactly. Anyone who's been in the Hong Kong community knows.
That's what I wondered. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a time that you would probably have been arresting me.
Could have been,
but
that's what I did.
That's the beauty of life.
I was a big arrester.
Thank you so much, Rupert.
Oh, you're welcome.
To everybody at home, I hope you've enjoyed this chat as much as I have. Massive love to you all. Please keep smiling through everything that's going on. Remember, time is precious. If you can like and subscribe, that's going to help. See you next time. Hello, friend. I hope this finds you well. My name's Chris THRALL. I'm a former Royal Marines Commando, and I fought my way back from chronic trauma and addiction to live, work and travel in 80 countries across all 7 continents, achieving all of my dreams and goals along the way. Now I pass my simple system on to other people, but I can only help you if you like and subscribe. So please do so, because you get one life, and if you live it right, one is enough.